Good morning, good morning, good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Coffee time.
Yeah.
Looks like you were on mute, my friend. David, good to have you here. Aaron,
Yeah.
good to see your face. Mr. Bruce, great as always. Hey guys, while we're waiting for others to join, at least for the first 5 minutes, what's been happening lately? What are you guys excited about? What are you guys celebrating from the last couple of weeks' time?
Yeah, so my wife and I just had our third kid. So we got a 2-week-old in our home. And so yeah, we've got our son Finn, he'll be 5 in July. Our girl Tessa, she'll be 3. And now Jedson, 2-week-old boy. So yeah, it's a ton of fun and
Yeah.
both extremes of a whole lot of joy in seeing Finn and Tessa be older brother, older sister,
Yeah.
and then just extreme exhaustion and frustration.
Yep,
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
We get
yeah.
that, man. Congratulations. That's
Thank
exciting.
you. Thank you.
Now, with Finn at 5 years, that was before Finn from Star Wars had come out too. So
Yeah.
nice.
So believe it or not, we actually named him when my wife and I first got married almost 10 years ago. We took a Bible class together, and our favorite character in the Old Testament was Phineas. And we love the thought that he's like a warrior priest. And so we said, if we have a boy, we were thinking we'd go
Love it.
Phineas, but we went with Finley instead because we got some Irish in us, and we like the spelling a little better. But yeah, people ask us Phineas and Ferb or Finn from Star Wars, and
Yeah.
say, no, let us tell you a different story.
Good. Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, we're celebrating with you, man.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Somebody else, what are you celebrating?
Yeah, we just wrapped up our Yes Camp. So that's youth education sports. And that was a lot of fun. We had divided the kids into 4 teams. And the last game that they had, the championship game, was great. Unfortunately, my Bulls lost to the Lakers, but only by 2. And it was awesome to see the excitement that the kids had, the parents and everyone as well. And I think we're going to see some good relationships and good fruit from it. So we're celebrating that right now.
That's good. Is this your second or third round? Remind me.
Fourth.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So we're going to do a one night, one off on a Friday night. We're going to get some money from the county to do that. They supply sort of funds to organizations to do those sorts of things.
Great.
And that's when we'll also unveil the rings for the championship team too. And then we'll probably do a 5th rendition of this as well in the future.
So good, man. I'm so glad that it's producing like that. That's awesome, Aaron.
Yeah.
Aaron, do you mind telling me a little bit, just quick context on that idea and what you're doing?
Yeah. So I've got a lot of sports in my background. And when COVID hit, one thing we noticed was the teens were especially suffering, the kids and the teens.
Yeah.
Suicide rate went up dramatically. And a buddy and I said, well, it'd be good to get something started, some sort of camp, have it kind of like a youth atmosphere as well, and have a component of education involved too. And so we started a camp called Yes Camp with a bunch of other guys as well. And it's an interesting thing because all the guys are from outside the church. So it's definitely a community sort of organized team. And what's been interesting is we've been able to bring people in to teach kids how to do practical things, how to sew a button, how to change a tire. So we're doing very practical things. Usually there'll be about 3 classes, 20 minutes a piece. They'll do a rotation of those 3 classes, and then we'll play basketball. And then we'll do a short devotion afterwards. And many of these kids are not churched, so it gives us a wonderful opportunity to let them know about God. And now I'm going to be doing a Bible basics course, a 6-week course here. And so we've got some interest there too. So once we get back from being up north, we're going to do that, and it should be a lot of fun.
What a cool idea.
Yeah.
What kind of age range are you guys getting with that?
Yeah, so it varies, it just depends on what's going on with the schools. With the different sports and all of that. So we've seen older teenagers all the way down to about 10-year-olds. And so we try to accommodate all that sort of age group there. And it's strange because some nights we'll see like 20 kids and other nights we'll see 40. And so that all varies. That's all in flux as well. but we're seeing a consistency with a certain group of kids and a certain group of families as well. So we're trying to build into them right now.
Very cool, man. Thanks, man.
Yeah, good stuff. In fact, probably 2 iterations back, I had heard about Yes Camp. Aaron was telling me about what had been happening, and then Church of God did a write-up on it as well. So if you wanted to go back into the archives, Jesus is the subject, there is a basic write-up there about it as well. So good stuff. Hey, Ron, welcome to the call. Good to have you here.
Hey, good to see you.
Yeah.
Hi, Bruce. I see you. Oh yeah, I can see you. I guess you can see me about as good as I can see you. So anyhow.
Hey, we're 5 minutes in. I want to make sure to give
Yes.
plenty of time over to Bruce. And so let me just set the stage, give you a little bit of vision where we're going, not just with this one webinar, but also with the series. And so last year we did a webinar series, and mainly they were outside voices. I used a lot of the leverage of guest speakers. And so we had Andrew Chalmers and, just various people from outside of the region. This year I wanted to emphasize voices from inside the region and give our brothers and sisters platforms to be able to talk about areas that either maybe they bring a level of expertise or passion to, so that we can learn from one another. And so first up is going to be our own Bruce Newton. He's going to be sharing about YMI, which is going to be awesome to hear. This has been a labor of love that has been many years and maybe even decades in the dreaming and making. And so you're going to get to hear firsthand before this is even launched about what's up and coming. I'll give a little bit of pitch about that right before he starts. Next, we're going to have Aaron Talbot up, and he's going to be talking about virtues, which if you get into a deep conversation with Aaron, you're going to hear about classical virtues quite a bit. And then also something that has been just, I'm sure Aaron probably already had this in his heart, but something at least I've been able to glean from him just about friendship and partnership and the incredible importance. So you heard him briefly talk about it at the annual conference. I want to give him a full hour to be able to really dive deep with us. You'll probably hear loads of quotes from Greek philosophers and ancients and stuff like that. So you're really going to get a lot out of it. And then the third round is going to be Dr. Dayton Kitterman. And so I think Dayton is so kind and familiar to us that oftentimes I think we forget about really the deep roots and wide influence that he has, especially in like the Tulare County, Central Valley area. He's established multiple counseling centers over the course of his ministry years. There's a new one that he has up and running from the last 3 years, or maybe a little bit more than that. And it's a biblical counseling center, and it's just phenomenal. I've personally benefited from it. My daughters have personally benefited from it. And I'd love to just make sure that you understand about what he's doing, the resource that is available, how that might help you individually, but also with people in your congregations. It's a really, really incredible ministry that is influencing hundreds of people on a regular basis. So that's kind of where we're headed for at least the first 3 months. But without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Bruce. You're going to hear about Yosemite Ministry Institute because, as many of you know, we have a choked leadership pipeline. We may have empty buildings. We may have churches that need somebody to take the helm, but oftentimes we don't have many up and coming ministers. And so Bruce has been kicking this problem around for a long time. He's looked at it from just about every angle possible, and born out of that is YMI. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Bruce. Except you've got to unmute your mic, Bruce.
Okay, there I am. Okay, awesome. The idea from this stems from, of course, like Michael said, from decades of observation of what's going on within the broader church, not just ours, but the broader church, looking at universities and seminaries that are associated with the Church of God and beyond, and noting that, number one, they're not kicking out any new ministers. It's virtually zero. And I really became in contact with that. I was teaching a Pauline literature course at Azusa Pacific University, and I had 35 students in one classroom. And about halfway through the class, I said, I just need to ask a few questions. How many of you guys or gals are planning on going into the pastorate after this? I mean, the reason I asked the question is it's a Pauline literature class. And it's like, wouldn't you be considering it at some point? not one hand went up. And I said, so nobody at all. Finally, two raised their hands, and both of them said they wanted to be in counseling and associate themselves in a minor way with the church, kind of hang out a shingle for one day a week or something like that as a point of possible contact and building their business. Okay, well, that wasn't anybody really aiming at preferred ministry, as it were. So I asked why. And they said, it's simple. It really came down to this. Several of them said, I would have considered it. I would have wanted it, but I can't spend over $200,000 for an undergraduate education and come out and make, if I can even find a job for $35,000, it just doesn't pencil out. I can't support a family. I can't even support myself. So it's a no-go. And at that time, I really began thinking about, boy, something's got to change here. Now, when I went to Azusa in my undergrad years, Azusa Pacific, hang on to your hat, was $2,800 a year for room, board, and tuition. Huh? Now, a lot has changed since then. I'll talk about this. I've got a little paper that if you guys give me your email addresses, I will clean it up a little bit and send it to you. It goes into a little bit deeper description of what's going on here, and I may kind of read through it just a little bit as we go. But when I got back into, I got right out into ministry in 1976. As soon as I got married, I was in and some of you are going, 76, did they have churches then? Yes, they did. I was serving at the Intercommunity Church of God in Covina, California, and Howard Herringshaw was the lead pastor. Frank Bearden was the music guy. I had a degree in music and a degree in theology, but Frank was there before me, so he got the music part and I got the kids part. And my first year in ministry was, yeah, that's really great, Mike. So puts it in perspective. So actually, when we got started, it was a terrific year. We had 7 kids in the junior high and high school combined, and in a year there's about 115 people in church, and within a year we had 120 kids in the youth group. And that did not sit well, believe it or not, with the majority of the adults in the congregation. They wanted to know what all these kids were doing around here, just making noise and trouble and so we, in a short while after that, we decided we're going to take a break, and we did. I told the Lord, I'll tell you what, I will be back in a year. I'm just going to go out and sell real estate with my wife and do stuff like that. Well, it ended up 8 years later that I got back into the game. I was living up in Oregon in a little teeny town outside of Grants Pass. And by then I had been in business and I had more money than anybody ought to have. And Ron will remember those days when I got him into the same business I was in. And I made a ton of money, and more money than anybody should. And so I bought a ranch, and I retired at the age of 32. And then the Lord decided that he needed me back in ministry. So he made the underlying company go bankrupt with a hostile takeover. And at the very same moment, our third child was born, and we didn't know it, but 13 days later, we found out she was only at the beginning of 4 open heart surgeries throughout her lifetime. Very complex, and very few people, maybe only one in the world, could actually pull it off. And so at that time, we lost the ranch, and the Lord started tapping on my shoulder saying, don't you think it was, you said a year, right? It's been 8 years. Don't you think it's time? Yeah, yes, sir. I do think it's time. And so I had enjoyed the money. I had enjoyed all that, but I realized it didn't do anything for me. I was desperately needing to feel like I was back with God again. And so I got back into ministry at the First Church of God in Fresno, California. And that worked out to be a really good 3-year period of recovery for me. And then I was pulled back into a lead ministry, which I never saw myself doing. That was not my goal in life, to do a lead ministry. But I took the things that I'd learned in business and applied them to church growth, and it ended up being a good combination. So fast forward to the year 2001, I'm teaching at Azusa while trying to run a church with 300 plus people in it, and realized real soon that doing a church and teaching at college is too much. And so but I took a lot from me, realizing the pipeline truly was dry, and there was a couple reasons. So I'm going to just read pretty quickly through what I've written here, and it's some of it may be a little bit complex, so I'll keep rolling. An underlying theme in everything that I have done since being in business is this: if you want to be successful in any enterprise of building an organism, whether it's your body or whether it's your marriage or whether it's IBM or whether it's Apple or whatever it is, the way you continue to be relevant and successful in it is to find a need and fill it. It's quite simple. Find a need and fill it. Right now, in this time in history, there's never been loneliness peaked this sharply. There's never been discontent this sharp. There's never been a background of hurt and of offense and of just a dark cloud in the background of everyone. What none of us probably are talking about yet in church settings is something we fear to talk about. And I would approach it very warily, and that is, how many people in your church are scared to death of World War III starting? You know, if I read the media, it says that it's running close to 80%. And I would have assumed that my church people feel the same way, but nobody is bringing it up. It's the untouchable subject right now. If you want to clear out a room, go to a party and say, hey, anybody want to talk about death and dying? You know, that's a good way to get people to clear out of the room. So, okay, the beginning of Yosemite Ministry Institute really had its roots back when I taught that class at Azusa and realized there's nobody going into ministry. And there's really two reasons. The primary, which we have control over, is monetary. I talked to the president of Azusa Pacific College at that time, and for 10 years afterwards until he died. John was a roommate of mine during college, and a treasured friend. My graduate degrees from, one of them is from Biola, so Talbot University, that's named after Aaron Talbot's family. And they come from a different point of view, but it was a stringent academic program in apologetics that I really learned a ton from. And with all that put together, plus I have another master's in learning development theory, which is, you know, I didn't plan all those things. They just sort of happened. I bumped into them. I'm a total accident in my life. So other than God apparently was doing it. So the beginning of YMI, Yosemite Ministry Institute. Why? Because it's critical, because there's no other name under heaven whereby men may be saved, period. And our belief is within the Church of God, I think pretty much totally, that without Christ, you enter eternity without Christ and you stay without Christ. And that is a horrific idea for anybody. And if we have any compassion upon anyone, it suddenly becomes urgent to the extreme to find a way to get that message through to them, because everybody's on a declining timeline. The time is ticking out. So Paul had the essential problem that we do in Greco-Roman culture. He was trying to engage a culture that was absolutely Christless, had never heard of Christ, and had a zillion gods, if you read the Mars Hill Chronicle, if it were, and you find out nobody even knew who he was. Nobody knew who Christ was or the monotheistic God was. But we have the same problem because our worldview has been abandoning it since the 1930s. Europe started abandoning real truth or absolute truth in the 1890s. We started abandoning it in the 1930s. And it was a very slow burn, but it caught up to us. And so by the time the 60s and 70s came around and I was a teenager, and it was free love and Haight-Ashbury and dropping acid and the whole 9 yards like that, then we started to take a wide divergence away from God. And so Paul had the same problem in that nobody knew God, nobody wanted to know God really, but he had to utilize entirely new ways of presentation. 1 Corinthians 9:19, I'm going to read it. 1 Corinthians 9:19 through 23 says this: though I am free and belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I become like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I become like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but I am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak, I have become weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all men, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all of this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. Now, to me, that's driven everything we've done through the years as I was serving Sierra Pines. It was, we can't do it like we've ever done it before. We're going to do it completely differently. We're going to do it according to the need of the seeker. What do they need to hear? Find a need and fill it. What do they need to hear? Well, they're lonely, they're despairing, they're angry, they're fighting with their mates. We'll bring up the text later that Jesus is saying, pray for the workers for the field. The fields are white unto harvest. And y'all who are grown up in the Central Valley are familiar with driving by cotton fields, and you see those cotton fields just burst with that white blossom at a certain point. Look at the plant underneath, it's dead. Okay, the plant underneath has died, the cotton boll has just puffed out there. Now, you also know if it rains on cotton, it does great damage. And so ask yourself, you're standing before 3 fields, 10 acres each of cotton, and you got 10 workers, and you don't have a fancy machine. You're just going to go pick this cotton, and rain is coming tomorrow. In one field, there's just a few cotton bolls left. It's kind of bare. In the next field, it's about halfway full, looking much better. In the third field, it's absolutely white. It's bursting everywhere. Rain is coming tomorrow. Where are you putting your people to work first? If you're good at logistics, you're going to put them to work on the third field. You're going to get as much of that into the bag as you possibly can. The field that is white unto harvest in American culture, I have deduced, is between 25 and 35 years old in the adult population, and even more so from the age of about 5 to 18 in the children's population. Over 80% of people that come to Christ come before the age of 18. Not that they don't go out and sow their wild oats and make failures, but they come into contact with Christ. That's where, if you're going to spend your money on evangelization, that's where you spend your money. That's where you spend your effort. That's where you spend your resource, because that's where you're going to get a big harvest. And what we noticed is this: you bring in kids, and that brings in the young families. Those are both broken right now. I've never seen such a time in history as now, because look at all that's happening with, dare I say it, with the whole idea of making our kids sexually aware at the age of 5 or 6 years old and giving them a choice. Are you kidding me? This is I couldn't even choose what brand of cereal I wanted by that time. So it's a dangerous time to be a kid. It's a dangerous time to be a young family. And about that age, if you got married when you were 22, 23 years old, when are you starting to run into problems in your marriage and starting to run into conflict? It's about there, so when you're in trouble and you're down on the ground, that's when you will consider anything, even the possibility of going back to church. And when you get kids on the stage, grandmas, grandpas, aunts, and uncles are all required to be there. We found out we had a larger intake of people when we had kids in our program. We had a larger intake of people over 65 than we ever had before, because they came because their kids and their grandkids were there. Their devotion was there. So in the current model of church ecclesiology, if you will, the current model is a model that was created before 1935. It was created in an agrarian culture. The reason you come to church at 10 or 11 o'clock on Sunday morning is by then the farmer has milked the cows, fed the chickens, and slopped the pigs, and he could get in his buckboard and drive to church and have dinner on the grounds afterwards. That's the reason we choose that time. But it's also stuck pretty well, because the main people that are going to want to seek church have set aside Sunday. A far greater population is set aside Sunday for time off than any other day of the week. And so starting a church on Saturday night, I find might work in the urban areas in the church, but does not work in the country. At least it didn't for us. We did it. It was a do it over, didn't work. We found out we got better by, rather than having a Saturday night service and 2 on Sunday, we did 3 on Sunday morning, starting 8 o'clock, 9:30, 11 o'clock, and then we could get all the people in that we had to. But the model that we're using is thoroughly outdated. And with the onset of a much faster paced, consumer-driven, information-hungry society, stoked by the immediacy of online communication and social media, the earlier church model has struggled to stay relevant. It's just really struggling. Do I still think you should do Sunday morning services? Absolutely. It's the time that most Americans have set aside to go to church. And so that's, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. It's had long sticking power. Earlier educational models in the church and for post-education became entangled in a quagmire, if you will, of government funding issues. So the reason that Azusa was $2,800 for a year back in 1971, when I first started going there, was that there was no money, from the government, hardly any money from the government. But as money increased from the government, Christian schools kept track with doing that. And then they arranged all their finances around it, and now they're dependent on it. And so as a result, the average kid going to the classes that I was teaching back in 2001 was paying close to 50 grand a year. Now it's over that. At Azusa, Point Loma, Biola, and many of the others, they've been spending tons of money. It just doesn't work. Beyond that, all these changes that have happened, most professions have accommodated the changes much more easily than we have. So if you're going to go into IT, information technology, you'll go to maybe 1 year of trying to get licensures. And then within that year, you will make more money by triple or more than one of our college students coming out with a bachelor's into Christian education. It doesn't work. If I wanted to make $100,000 a year, I'd go into IT and I'd get a Microsoft license and go from there. It's quite simple, and pay, by the way, very little to do that. So the return on investment is extraordinary compared to us. The older model of education also, it takes forever to change educational models, by the way. it's like, it's a Titanic. If you got a degree in computer science from a college or a university, you'd be sadly outdated the day you stepped into the market, because it takes them so many years to print a textbook, to create and print a textbook. And that's not the way it's done anymore, but they're making this very slow turn. And they just don't keep up. As a result, the church has modeled itself in a way that would try to train a pastor for the 1935 church. Still does. That's where things are at. In fact, most pastors I talk to, and I ask them, did school train you for what your actual experience has turned out to be? And nearly all of them will say, not even close, not even close. So I determined then that we had to create a model that would be dynamic and changing enough, swift on its feet to respond to the culture that is happening in front of us right now. Because if we don't do something, I have a very firm prejudice. I believe that the local church is the hope of the world, period. I don't think government can do it. It's absolutely toothless when it comes to this. The government will try to throw money at the drug problem in the US. It doesn't fix anything. 15% of the people that go through drug rehab and government programs actually are successful at it. Close to 85% of people that go through Christian rehab programs are successful with very little recidivism. So it's, the church has it. They have the hope. They are the hope of the world, period. There is, I don't trust any other agency. So, but I'm seeing in pastors' lives that they're depressed, they're defeated, they feel like they don't know how to grapple with what's around them. And within denominations like ours that are fiercely independent, we're not getting much help from each other even, you know, so it's, we've become lone wolves. And if you can't handle it, you're not asking the guy next to you. So that has to change with a fog of political differences and cultural crossroad landmines, things like human sexuality, those landmines, transsexuality, all those sort of things going on. Black Lives Matter, political, Republican, and all the polemical things that have driven people to the side walls, and people in your church are arguing about it. 85% of the guys in the Baptist movement say they are thoroughly discouraged at what has happened in the last 3 years in the political arena within their churches, that their people aren't even talking to each other. Families are breaking up over Republican versus Democrat. And, you know, I've told my people again and again, the kingdom of God is much bigger than the politics of man. You got to put that aside and determine what's important. So, but what I'm hearing from some of the guys that I talk to is depression, frustration, what I call the Solomon syndrome, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Pointless, pointless, it's all stinking pointless. What's the point? I'm working my rear end off here and I'm trying to create peace amongst people, and everybody's mad at everybody and tired and weary. So the only thing that's constant is change. So we have to reassess, remodel our approach to the culture of today without sacrificing our core tenets or our core beliefs and doctrines. Can we do that? And my answer is yes, we most certainly can. Within the Church of God, I think we have a greater capacity to do it than perhaps any other denomination I'm aware of right now. And I keep in touch with all of them. But I think the Church of God has a greater capacity. It's more flexible. We have less, we believe in the core tenets of what we do. We believe in the core values of critical doctrine. We don't get all upset necessarily if somebody comes into our church that believes in pre-trib. Okay. We've got people in our churches at Sierra Pines. I know we've got people, probably 20–30% of people that have a private prayer language. That doesn't disturb us in the least. We just don't let any one particular sect of things take over. And I think that's an important thing. Our attempt with YMI is to establish an outcome-based model of education that is, number one, effective to reach today's audience. Number two, financially viable for anyone who may consider the possibility of ministry. I mean, really viable, as in as close to free as we can possibly make it, because they're not going to make much money when they get out. Okay, they're going to give up a ton of money over their lifetime. It needs to be ongoing. In other words, keep on going no matter what. When you start, you never end in the educational model, because, gang, when I was in real estate, we had to go to continuing education classes all the time. When I was a teacher in the California school system, we had to go to continuing education all the time. If you're selling insurance, you have to go to continuing education. Ours is the most complex, wide-reaching, critical job on the planet, with more complexities in it, and as many complexities as you have people in your church, compounded by their dysfunction. And with that, you don't have to go for any continuing education. And unless the door is really wide open for you to do so and fun for you to do it, you're probably not going to do it because you already are overwhelmed. So part of our job is to make it fun. So it's to be able to give pastors the tools for success in ministry that will enable both the servant of God to thrive and his or her own congregation to thrive in every possible metric that we can measure. So now I'm going to go right into, I'm going to take a break here and go into what is the school itself. What are the components? Because it's a 4-component program, and that keeps it flexible and movable and adaptable, dynamic, so that it can change with the needs of both the population of the community and the culture, but also the needs of the candidates who may assume it. So any questions thus far? I've been just talking my head off here, so. You okay?
Could you speak to real quick? I liked your Solomon syndrome phrase. That's great. And then Pastor Michael, I noticed you dropped in there. Ecclesiastes is definitely the text of our day. Just real briefly, I know it's not the main subject of today's conversation, but how would you guys see Ecclesiastes speaking to our era or generation of the church?
You know, it's always important, of course, to recognize that Ecclesiastes, you don't want to pull a text out of context with Ecclesiastes, particularly because Solomon was not necessarily at this stage in his life a godly man, but he was a guy that was really able to describe what the culture of today feels. And I think, you know, I use 2 different prophetic utterances in that sense. Solomon, because of his sense of uselessness, he's got more than anybody in the whole world at the time. You know, he is all his physical desires with an army of women, you know, and he has permission to do so. I mean, every guy's dream. Come on, let's confess.
Right. Yeah.
And yet it's like, finds out it doesn't do it. It doesn't do it. How many times you thought about my grandma and my grandparents on my dad's side lived on the prairie in Kansas. They lived in a house that was made out of sod, a sod house with dirt floors, and in the Dust Bowl. And there was no microwave. There was no oven inside. There was no bathroom inside. You couldn't go to the store today and get a head of lettuce. Okay, that wasn't even imaginable. You're living on a dirt floor and you go to the market. According to her, when I talked to her, she said we would go to the store about once every 3 or 4 months. And we would get coffee and chocolate and sugar and salt and maybe a few pieces of candy, and everything else was at home. You know, so I asked her, how did she wash her dishes? Get this, with dirt. Okay, you take your steel plate and you buff it off with dirt, sand.
Their microbiomes were strong.
Oh, wow, you know?
Yeah,
and so we are, Solomon would be jealous of any one of our dwellings. Absolutely. You can go anywhere and take a shower. What's a shower?
Yeah.
And water just comes out of this thing, and come on. So we're richer than Solomon, and we found out it doesn't do it for us. We're lonely.
Yeah.
Existential loneliness is pervasive, you know, just the loneliness that comes from the pure fact that we're existing, and we're separated, and the addition of electronic media has not made it any better. It's in fact, it's exacerbated many of the underlying problems that we have with life and with each other. And so it's not going to get better, and the government isn't going to fix it. It doesn't have any fixes. The damage and the hurt is at the spiritual level. So part of what we even have to deal with is the fact that the modern day student doesn't necessarily believe in a dualistic nature. The modern day student believes we're just meat. Okay. And because we're just meat, we're a three-dimensional period. There is no fourth dimension, fifth dimension. There is no soul. So because of that, we have very little to appeal to in the beginning. We have to first lay the groundwork of proving the fact that there is, in fact, a human soul, and there's logical reasons to assume so. You have to appeal to even quantum mechanics and those sort of avenues in modern day science to prove the point. For instance, we know there's 11 dimensions at minimum. We can only see 3 plus time. That's it. Okay, what's happening in the other dimensions? Every dimension is larger than, yep, he did.
I know. I was like, I know this is a tangent, but it captured me, you know. But anyway, it could be another conversation. I know you want to get into your 4 components, but I would love maybe in another conversation to talk about how do we take Ecclesiastes as a springboard to kind of swim in that meaninglessness and springboard into the hope in Christ, right? But anyway, I could talk about that for a while or listen to your guys' thoughts. But anyway, I don't want to keep you from the 4 components.
Bottom line, in the preaching mode, your people don't even know they have a need. It's buried. Okay. It's huge, but it's buried. And Ecclesiastes can open that up for them to find out the richest man in the world had needs exactly like mine and was in despair. You know, this is kind of just lances the wound. Okay, let me go on.
Thank you.
The model must be able to dynamically adapt with changing cultural audience. So we know going ahead of the time, we don't want to take a model and make it become the locked-in model forever. It has to be somewhat dynamic. I think Michael Guzman's heard me say this before. In every organization, every organism, you have a 5-stage development thing. You start with creation, which the blue sky possibilities. It's awesome. This is going to be so much fun. We're starting this church. We're starting this group. We're doing whatever. This is going to be awesome. And so if it succeeds, then what happens is we begin to say, well, that's really great. We should keep on doing this. And it gets a reputation. So it moves from creation to a reputation, and people say, that's awesome. Let's write a book about it. Okay. And then the next step is from creation to reputation moves to standardization. So we have to make sure that it all goes like this. This is the way we do it. We've never done it that way before, which is the last 7 words of a dying church. So, but it works that way in any organization. So creation to reputation makes for standardization, which moves to calcification, which moves to mortification. And unless at the top, unless you recreate your process, it's going to go down, which is exactly where we lay a lot of blame on the Church of God because it's who we know. Let me tell you, gang, this is everywhere. Every church movement has that. Even the non-evangelicals, like the main lines, are struggling with this. It's just the main lines have money from a long time ago, which they're still spending. So my niece is a priest in the Episcopalian church, and she makes double what I ever made, and my church was 10 times her size. So it's like, in the Church of God, you're never going to get rich in the Church of God. If you want to get rich, you need to go to the Presbyterian church or the, but then you're gonna struggle with some other problems. So anyway, the first component, there'll be 4 components, each with their purpose fitted to the needs of each individual candidate and or pastor. The first component will be foundational. The historical standard of the broader church has been a 4-year collegiate education, followed by a 2 to 4 year degree in graduate studies sometimes, and for some even going on beyond that. Though there are many that are attracted to that goal, it's become impossible to do. I mean, for me to re-get my education, to reobtain my education right now, it cost me about $600,000. And that's just not going to happen. We have to create a different way to do this. Y'all remember this guy named John Wesley? He went to Oxford in like 2.5 years, starting when he was 16 or 17 years old. He was pastoring by the time he was 19. He was pretty bright, you know. You may remember this other guy, the Prince of Preachers, I think they called him. What was his name again? Come on, people. My brain's old, so come on, Metropolitan Tabernacle, London.
I thought it was a professor's pop quiz. Spurgeon?
Spurgeon, yes. So Spurgeon is considered by most every seminary to be the Prince of Preachers, the best preacher. And if you have not read his stuff, you may not know, but he is the best there's ever been. And he had a high school education, period. That's it. And yet now we talk about, plus I don't think Peter and all those guys had one either. So anyway, so we have to change the model. They did back then. When Azusa started, they started as Los Angeles Training School for Christian Workers and Missionaries back in 1900 about. And they were free. If you could come out here and find food to eat, then you could come to school. And from that point on, then they came into the model they are now. And like I say, they're not making pastors anymore, but there's 7,000 people going to that school. And anyway, so the first model will be this. I find our first component, if you will, is to go to find an underlying foundation, a biblical foundation for this whole program. And the biblical foundation, there's 2 that I'm suggesting at the moment. I know there's more out there. I've had some guys go to universities across the US that are, you know, just for a year or 2. Church of God has some that you can go online. There's many that you can go online. But if you're young and unattached, especially YWAM is a good way to go. YWAM has a 9-month intensive school of biblical studies. I've taught in that. Cost is a little bit north of $10,500. It's 9 months long. They have a 3-month long too, but I'd be aiming at the 9-month. It's intense. It's 6 days a week, 13 hours a day. You go through the text 3 times in 3 different models of reception. So I find when these kids come out of this thing, they know the Bible better than you and me. They're incredible. A detractor from the program is that if you want to go to SBS, School of Biblical Studies it's called, you have to first go to the Discipleship Training School, which is a 6-month thing that runs about $8,500. So altogether, you're looking at better part of $20,000. But you would be done in the space of about 16 months, 15, 16 months. And only cost you 20 grand. People will send you on mission places, your church and different things like that will probably do that. If the SBS student graduates successfully, out of that whole program, they get 12 semester units, which they can apply to like their international university in Hawaii, that sort of thing. So the second thing that I'm recommending for probably most of our candidates is, and you may want to write this down, is biblicaltraining.org. biblicaltraining.org. It's a new thing. It's only been out for like a year and a half. It's incredible. It's an entirely new online resource with an unmatched faculty. If you look at the faculty on this thing, oh man, I mean, it is the dream team of any seminary anywhere in the world. These guys are from everywhere, from every denominational background with their, it just blew my mind. I went to a school with some pretty big names too, but nothing close to this. This has got all the highest and best guys in the model. It's without peer. This education in the model is, and this is how much it costs. It's free, absolutely free. Now, if you want to get credit for it, if you want to be tested in it, not just, it's kind of like an all auditing thing, but they do have tests that they can give you. But if you want that for each class, it's going to cost you $200 to have somebody test you and prove that you did it. You get a certificate to put on the wall. If you actually want a degree with a diploma, they've employed or connected with a small college back east, I forget the name of it, that you can actually go ahead and get a diploma from a college, but that's going to cost you quite a bit. It's not necessarily cheap. So that's an impediment in my mind. Our goal is to act at YMI as the proctor who gives the tests and the testing phases, and all along the way give them certificated proof of their accomplishments as they go through each class. After accomplishing 3 of our 4 component programs, they will graduate with us with a diploma. It would be a non-accredited diploma because I just don't care. I don't think anybody in the church cares. They want to know, can you do it? Is there proof you can do it? Remember, this is an outcome-based educational model. We're trying to make, in the end, a pastor who can be successful in their enterprise, because it's no fun not being successful. It's not. I would use language I don't want to use here. So the second component is to be, will be the Church of God's Leadership Focused Ministry Program, development program. And we've sent a few through that from Sierra Pines. And these guys, even like Brett Wilkinson already has a master's, and he was really blown away by the practical usability of this program. So it's a 3-year program. Is there a 3-year program, Michael?
Yeah,
you can do it faster, from my understanding. You can be working full time and do that. In fact, it's really kind of made for that. And so you're not going to be slowed down by it. So some of these components can actually be concurrent, if you will. So that program, it will serve as a bridge because it brings you into licensing and ordination. So that's kind of cool. I still don't consider you ultimately prepared for ministry, though, just because you've gone through that. Book learning is different than practical learning. So what you find out on the street is different than what they said in the book. So so we need some practical stuff for that. While you're going through that second component program, the person that gets in our program, we will attempt to place them with one of our churches. If they're coming from our district, they're going to be placed with a church within our district. If it's their own home church, if their own home church wants them, then they get first choice. But it's like we will find a place for them to serve within the Church of God district, to find a pastor who will oversee and walk alongside them. So also what begins within that component program is Pit Crew. Pit Crew has been perhaps the most effective thing that we've done up here. Pit Crew is called Pastors in Training. And it means you're going to be preaching in front of a crowd that has in front of them a worksheet and a test sheet that that grades your sermon from beginning to end. Did you have a strong opening? Did you wander all over the place? Did you make good use of comedic enterprise within this thing? Because little note here on the side, I try to get in a joke or a funny about every 3 minutes when I'm preaching. Otherwise, people start zoning out on you. As soon as you have a joke or just a funny line, just one line, funny line, they are all back focused. So that's something we've learned from a long time ago. And the third component will be Yosemite Ministry Institute's in-house training toward a practical, effective ministry candidate, one that can be reasonably expected to. And here's what we're going to expect in the end. We want them to be able to answer the heartfelt questions about life, God, salvation, practical living, successful life that both their parishioners and seekers of God may ask and struggle with from their community. You need a little dabbling in how to handle finances at the family level, little how to handle family discord without getting pulled into it, all those sort of things. So I know Dayton has a counseling background. We'll be pulling him in on some of that. My wife, of course, has a very large, successful practice up here in counseling, and has written books, a lot of them about counseling and stuff like that. Some of them were published by in fact, Warner Press, Church of God, and but her latest books have been published by somebody else, and they've done a whole lot better. So she was actually, her latest book was #1 on Amazon in counseling for about 6 weeks. So that was nice. So that's why I could retire. That's not true, but anyway, if you become an author, just remember to save your lunch money, because that's about all you're going to get. Anyway, #2, this candidate needs to know in the end how to utilize their church's human resources to most effectively draw the most souls to the kingdom of God. I have done very little evangelization while I've been a pastor. My church has done the evangelization. I guess you could say I've done evangelization from the pulpit and from counseling and stuff like that on the side, but they were the people that brought people, starting with 35 people through the years. Literally over the last 30 years, thousands and thousands of people have come to Sierra Pines Church, because if you're a preacher in today's world, you're preaching to a parade. The people that you're preaching to today aren't here next year, and some of them are here and some of them are gone, and you got new ones. And I go to church now, and when Mike Masacchio became the pastor, I'm still on staff as legacy pastor, but when Mike became the pastor, it just pulled in a whole lot of younger families, because there's a young guy up on the stage, and it's been incredible, really. But I don't know 2/3 of the people that go to Sierra Pines Church in 2 years. I don't know them, and they know me. They'll say, "Hi, Pastor Bruce," and I don't think I've ever seen them before in my life. So I don't know. It could just be brain damage on my part. #3, they need to be effective in the pulpit, the coffee house, and the counseling room. Although in the long term, I don't suggest, once you get past about 80 people in your church, you need to pull out of counseling slowly. And by the time you get past 125 or so, you need to find a counselor somewhere you can attach to the church, because 5% of your people in your church will recruit 95% of your time. And so, and they're not the ones that build the church. They're the ones that just, in fact, they don't listen to a word you say. They just come to complain to you about their mate, and they will never follow your advice. Forget it. I've tried it. You're talking to a wall. So my wife takes that over. So anyway, you need to be effective in terms of the challenges of church finance, not only in terms of understanding a balance sheet and raising funds, but in terms of projections and the entrepreneurial enterprise of using those funds for future growth. So it's what I call the bungee cord system of finance. Sometimes you have to spend money you literally don't have so that there will be money in the future. Because if there's nothing attractive about what you're doing, you're going to lose momentum. And momentum is the number one thing that is going to help your church consistently grow. So you need to know how to spend money to make things attractive to people who are seeking. If you come into Sierra Pines, as some of you know from being there, are you hungry for a breakfast burrito? Because they're every Sunday morning. They're there. The first Sunday you get there, they're free. The next Sunday after that, they're $5, but the only ones that are similar in town cost $13 or $14 at the local restaurant. We've got free food out front as you come in. We got free coffee everywhere. We've got all the stuff that would attract a young family. Kids beg their parents to come to church. And that's part of our reason for making the kids program as interesting as it is, because if the kids want to come, the parents have to. I mean, if your kids get up in the morning and say, Mom, Dad, can we go to church? How guilty do you feel if you don't? And that's what we're trying to do, is create some guilt on that level. So number 5 on that, underneath that one, is casting vision that truly engages their congregation and community. And last but not least, we have to answer the up-to-date queries and challenges coming at us from a society who no longer takes God for granted or assumes his reality. Because of these issues, which are forever changing and morphing, we need to create a robust, rapidly growing scholarship in apologetics. We already have some here. I'm sure some of you guys have studied it to some degree as well. During their third component of YMI, the student will face the universe of ideas coming from postmodern philosophy and science, history, canonical studies, cosmology, psychology, theodicy. Theodicy is a real big one because that's answering the question of how can God be a good God if there's so much suffering in the world? And it's defending God in the face of human pain. So there's a lot more to explore here, but component 4 is a commitment to our continuing education model. So in other words, that 3 times a year, we're going to get together, and the class, if you will actually cover about 3 months period of time to give some flexibility to everyone going through it. But we'll bring in some very successful people at different levels of the Christian experience, and they will probably ask you to read a book, buy a book and read a book, and then maybe write a short paper on the book. And it probably would help you in your own pulpit as well, to have that in your back pocket going through those sort of things. So Marty Grubbs will be up on the line. I'm sure Jim Lyon will be on the line. Rod Stafford. So some of those guys from the Church of God, and some people from from Biola that I know I will pull in as well, because we'll probably go back to doing a yearly apologetics worldview conference every year, and that would be something to attend. We would pay for the speaker at that, and then we'd have a book that either they had written or something like that. Guys like Gary Habermas, who's probably the world's leading expert on the resurrection, and probably in the top 3 on the Shroud of Turin. Those are people we'll be pulling in to be guest lecturers once a year. So anyway, that's all I got for right now. I know I went over 3 minutes.
No, you're good, Bruce. Awesome. I know Aaron had sent me a message saying that he was having some web issues or internet issues, and so he was trying to log back on, and so he apologized for that. And then you saw David just said he had to jump off for another meeting. So thanks so much, Bruce, for introducing YMI to us, giving us the foundation for it. What about how would a pastor connect? So there's the details about what it is. But let's say that Ron here has a person he wants to get plugged into it. What would you want them to do?
Basically, in our beginning, I'll be ecstatic if I'm not looking for a 30 student body. I'm looking for, and the first year as we begin to really get things rolling and together, I think if we have 3 to 5, that'll be successful. That'll be awesome. And then hopefully it'll grow from then. But going into September, I'm going to hopefully within the next month and a half, put out a brochure that to all the pastors, and as you know, I'm going around to all the churches and knocking on doors, and I'm personally seeing who they've got sitting in their audience, because I'm looking for candidates that might be out there, and asking the pastor themselves, and we'll start it cooking. I've got actually right now there's 2 that are online right now, 3 that are online right now. One's from Bakersfield, actually not Bakersfield, but that his church is Bakersfield Church, and then he's actually serving in the Army back east, but he wants to get into ministry. So this will work out well for him. And then there's another young man from up at Sierra Pines that kind of blew my mind the other day, said, I want to be part of this. And so, okay, that's great. So if you've got somebody in your congregation who you think might be a candidate for doing this sort of thing, just let us know. The other part, which is obviously it all can't be free, but I would like to figure out a way for all these candidates to make it as close to free as we can get it. If they decide to go to YWAM and DTS and stuff like that, I would hope they would try to pay for their own DTS. We'll help if possible, but if they have some skin in the game, maybe they'll go the distance. And so we're trying to carefully balance that one. On the other end, pastors that are currently pastoring, I know they don't have a lot of money to work with, and so when I say how much it would cost, I'm saying, we're talking $200 or $300 a year, so as close to free as you can get it. And that would be if we have, let's say one of you is going to be teaching, we want to reward you a little bit for your time and your expenses going into the process, teaching in a particular subject that you really have a heart about. And so if you're going to do that, then we need to probably at least get you $1,000 or something, because it's hard work teaching. I've done it, and it's hard work. And so it's my teaching probably will not take much place until a student gets within the 3rd area, which is kind of our graduate area. By the time you've gone through your 2nd, you're already probably on your way to getting licensed and ordained. The 3rd part, with dealing with all the practical issues and pastorate, church growth, apologetics, all those sort of things, just the 10,000 things that you know about ministry that it would be hard to write down in a book or a program. But ideally, this is going to be really powered by mentors as much as anything, because in my observation, the people that are most powerful have been mentored by somebody who knew what they were doing. 95%, if you heard this one before, I'm sure 95% of all Nobel Prize winners were mentored by previous Nobel Prize winners. And there's a reason for that. So hang out with successful people in whatever enterprise it is that you're involved in, that you're excited about. The old line goes, take a rich man to lunch and pay for the lunch, so yeah.
One other question, Bruce, is there a website or anything like that where people can go find out more about it, or is that not yet ready to go?
I would suggest that you at least go and really rustle around biblicaltraining.org. And I will be sending out to all the emails that you may have supply me with. I've got Ron's email, I think. I don't know David's information. Where is David working? David Hawes, where is he working?
He's in Madera. So
Madera.
He's the pastor from the Well that Mike is partnered together with.
Yeah. Okay, I should know him. They were at the church the other day. Just my brain doesn't work. So yeah, he's so yeah, I'll try to get some of that up online within by what is this is April, May. By June 1st at the latest, we'll have that. Also, I just wanted to remind everybody, what date is it that we're going to have a pastoral retreat, which is, what did I just do with that? Let's see here. I'll send you that as well. It's about a week and a half after the council retreat up here at North Campus. We'll be having Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I think it is, a pastoral retreat, and invite everybody. They don't have to pay anything. It'll be largely funded by YMI. So not only will we kind of make our case there, but also just to get the guys away from everything, maybe hit Yosemite for half a day, that sort of thing, eat a lot of tri-tip and good stuff, and eat excessively and play excessively and
Good.
learn some stuff. So yeah, so that'll be coming up then. So
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Bruce, for the time and for the information. Thanks for this labor of love. And we look forward to being able to hear more and seeing that first round of graduates. That's going to be really amazing to be able to watch and see. So
that is going to be.
All right, friends. Hey, if you want to jump on at 11 o'clock today, we've got the decentralized church discussion. And then today at 1 o'clock, we've got the Bible project. And the homework on that one would be really short. There's just one video to watch. And so if you're in that loop, you can go ahead and watch that and jump into the conversation. So take care. Blessings all.
See you guys. See you, Ron.